Tonight, when you fall asleep, something will happen to your body that ancient humans considered a rehearsal for death. Your breathing will slow, your muscles will go completely limp, your consciousness will disappear. For hours, you will be completely unreachable. And every morning when ancient humans woke up, they asked themselves the same question that kept them awake at night. If sleep and death feel identical, how do you know you will come back from this one? Right now, the only reason you know sleep is not death is because you have survived it thousands of times before. This was not superstition. This was not primitive fear. This was the most logical conclusion a human brain could reach after watching someone die for the very first time. A person was alive. Then they closed their eyes. Then they looked exactly like someone sleeping. Same closed eyes, same still body, same silence. The only difference was that this one never woke up. And that single observation, made somewhere on the African savanna 300,000 years ago, shaped every religion, every burial ritual, every prayer, and every fear of darkness that humans have carried ever since. But here is where it gets genuinely unsettling. In 2013, neuroscientist Jimo Borjigin at the University of Michigan published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Her team measured brain activity in dying patients in the final moments before death. What they found made the entire scientific community stop. In the last 30 seconds of life, brain activity did not slow down. It surged, specifically in the regions responsible for conscious experience, visual processing, and memory. The dying brain became, briefly, more active than it ever was during normal waking life. Borjigin called it a hidden brain state, a state that looked remarkably, almost exactly, like the brain activity recorded during the deepest stages of REM sleep. Your ancient ancestors looked at death and sleep and said, "These are the same thing." A University of Michigan brain scanner looked at death and sleep and said they were not entirely wrong. Now here is something that will make this even stranger. Across ancient civilizations, death and sleep were often described using the same metaphor, not similar words. The same metaphor. Ancient Greeks called death thanatos and sleep hypnos, twin brothers, born from the same mother, identical in every way except one never let you go. Ancient Egyptians believed the soul, what they called the Ba, left the body every single night during sleep and wandered freely. Death was simply the night the Ba decided not to return. Ancient Mesopotamians, the oldest civilization ever discovered, wrote on their clay tablets that death was the long sleep. Ancient Chinese texts describe death as da shui, the great sleep. Ancient Sanskrit texts call it nitya mukti, the permanent rest. Across cultures that never met, never traded, never knew each other existed, every single one arrived at the same conclusion independently. Death is sleep you do not wake up from. This was not coincidence. This was observation. Ancient humans watched death happen the same way they watched everything, carefully, repeatedly, without explanation. And every single time, a living person became a sleeping person. The only question was whether they would open their eyes again. But here is the scientific detail that nobody talks about. Every night, without exception, your body does something that would have confirmed every ancient belief about sleep and death. It paralyzes you. During REM sleep, the stage where dreaming occurs, your brainstem sends a signal that deliberately cuts off all motor function in your body. Every voluntary muscle, arms, legs, hands, completely paralyzed. This is called REM atonia. It is not a malfunction, it is intentional. Scientists believe it prevents you from physically acting out your dreams. But here is what ancient humans saw. A sleeping person, completely still, completely limp, unresponsive to touch, unresponsive to sound, breathing barely visible, every muscle dead, and a dead person, completely still, completely limp, unresponsive to touch, unresponsive to sound. The only observable difference, breathing. Ancient humans were not being primitive when they called sleep a little death. They were being precise. And then there is the hypnic jerk. You have felt this. The moment right before you fall asleep, a sudden violent jolt through your entire body. Like falling, like something pulling you back. Science calls it a hypnic jerk, an involuntary muscle contraction that occurs at the exact boundary between wakefulness and sleep. Roughly 70% of humans experience it. Ancient humans had a different explanation. The jolt was the body resisting, fighting against crossing into the death state. Your muscles firing one last desperate signal, not yet, not tonight. And sometimes, the jolt would wake a person completely, gasping, heart pounding, convinced for one terrifying second that they had almost not come back. And they were not entirely wrong about the feeling, because here is where ancient belief and modern science collide in the most unexpected way. In 1975, cardiologist Raymond Moody published research on patients who had been clinically dead and successfully resuscitated. He collected over 150 accounts of what these patients experienced during clinical death. The consistency across cases was extraordinary. Patients reported moving through darkness, encountering light, feeling profound peace, experiencing vivid visual scenes more real than waking life. What Moody did not initially realize, and what researchers have confirmed since, is that these experiences are neurologically almost identical to the experiences reported during lucid dreaming. The same visual intensity, the same emotional clarity, the same sense of traveling somewhere, the same feeling of returning from a place that cannot be described in words. Ancient humans had no word for near-death experience. They had a word for it. They called it dreaming, and this is where the burial evidence becomes impossible to ignore. Some of the earliest evidence of humans carefully treating their dead suggests something remarkable. Bodies were not disposed of. They were prepared, placed in deliberate sleeping positions, curled on their sides, knees drawn toward the chest, exactly the recovery position, exactly the way a sleeping person naturally lies. Food placed beside them, tools, weapons, ochre for the journey, not offerings to gods, supplies for someone who was going somewhere and would need things when they arrived. Because in the ancient mind, the dead were not dead. They were in the longest sleep. And in the longest sleep, they were dreaming. And in dreams, they still existed, still needed, still traveled. This is why ancient humans did not mourn the dead the way we mourn them. They visited them. They talked to them at burial sites, left fresh food, updated them on what was happening in the living world. Because the barrier between sleeping and waking, between death and life, was not a wall. It was a door. And dreams were the key. Now here is the final piece, the one that will stay with you tonight. In 1992, psychiatrist Thomas Wehr at the National Institute of Mental Health ran an experiment. He removed all artificial light from a group of volunteers for 1 month, exposing them to only natural darkness. Within 3 weeks, every single participant began waking naturally in the middle of the night, between what researchers called first sleep and second sleep, lying awake for 1 to 2 hours in complete darkness, not insomnia, something else entirely. Wehr measured their prolactin levels during this period, the hormone associated with meditation, deep spiritual states, and altered consciousness. Levels were dramatically elevated. Participants described the experience as deeply peaceful, thoughtful, almost visionary. Ancient humans spent hours in this state every single night, awake but not awake, asleep but not asleep, in the exact borderland that every ancient culture on Earth described as the place where the living and the dead could speak to each other. We eliminated it with a light switch. So tonight, when you lie down and your breathing slows and your muscles go limp and your consciousness begins to dissolve at the edges, remember what your ancestors knew. You have done this before. Every single night of your life, you have crossed into the long sleep, and every single morning, without knowing how, without any memory of the crossing, you have found your way back. The question ancient humans asked themselves in the darkness is the same question your body already knows the answer to. It just cannot tell you how it does it. And maybe, just maybe, that is exactly what they were trying to find out.